Los Del Rio, Soft Cell, Dexy's Midnight Runners, Right Said Fred, Tony Basil. Do you know what all of these names have in common?
Tell me.
They're all famous one-hit wonders, which is exactly what Kenny Dillingham and ASU are trying not to be.
Happy Kenny Dillingham Day, everybody. You guys, welcome into the PHNX Sun Devil Show. Of course, coming to you live from Studio K, presented by Circle K. Join Inner Circle for free by downloading that Circle K app today. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, terms and conditions apply at participating locations. Whoa. Visit CircleK.com for details. I'm Anthony Tocha, joined as always by this guy to my right, the salad snacker himself. Of course, we got Captain Redbeard behind the Mac making all of the lovely magic happen. Do us a solid. Hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, drop a 5-star review wherever you get your podcast. We got a ton to get into today. We are going to remove ourselves from all other Arizona State sports except football for today's program. You know, my personal favorite. Guys, we got sound from Kenny Dillingham, Jake Plummer, Charlie Ragle. We have a ton of fun stuff on our second to last show of the week. So everybody, let's get into the vibes today, huh? Why don't we?
I mean, I would love to get into the vibes.
The vibes are
immaculate. The vibes have been, listen, obviously, like, you know, baseball's doing great. Hockey's doing great. Like, there's a lot of good stuff going on.
A lot of good vibes, man.
A lot of good vibes. We have been focusing on a lot of the not so great vibes.
It's time to switch it up, though.
And, you know, it's much needed. It's much needed.
It is. It is. And I'll tell you, I was out there today for, well over an hour, just listening to some of these guys, again, at the helm of this program. Obviously, a legend in Jake Plummer, who you guys will hear from a little bit later on in the show. And Eric, it hasn't been that long since we heard from Kenny last.
How long has it been? Like a month?
Maybe a month. But there is just something about listening to him and listening to guys on this staff talk about Arizona State and talk about this program, and it just fires me up, dude. Yeah. Like, I was sitting there listening to, again, some of the stuff that Charlie had to say today, and I was sitting there, and I was just like, man, like, not only is this fan base so lucky to have not just a guy like Kenny, but this staff as a whole, and, just reaffirming their buy-in for this program and everything that they hope, Arizona State can be long-term. Obviously, you haven't heard any of it today.
No, I haven't. I've seen clips and bits and pieces and whatnot, but I'm excited to get some of the sound that Captain Redbeard is so furiously turning around. This is the beauty of showbiz.
Our very own workhorse in Kyle. Kyle's getting 30 carries a game.
Kyle's this pod's Cam Scatterbo.
It's really is. Sure. He absolutely
Who are we then if he's Cam Scatterbo?
I think it's pretty clear that.
I'm excited to see where you're going with this one.
I think it is very clear that we are just different versions of Sparky.
Okay. You're like, what can I say that won't offend him right now? Well, okay, how about this? How about your Levitt, because you drive the show, you're setting it up. I'll be Jordan Tyson, because I get injured all the time.
You do get
injured all the time.
Yeah, that's fair.
So I'll be Jordan Tyson. He'll be Cam Scatterbo. You could be Sam Levitt.
I don't have the flow that Sam Levitt has, or the swagger, I feel like.
No, but, we can't all be one-to-one comparisons.
We can't.
Yeah. Like, Kyle's too buff to be Cam Scatterbo. He's just too big. So,
hey, if you haven't seen...
And me, I'm too fast.
If you haven't seen Captain Redbeard in person, dude,
he's a unit.
He's a unit.
I will say this. One thing that kind of popped into my mind when you're talking about how lucky we all are, and I agree with you, and what I'm about to say is a joke, but I think it's funny.
Oh, God.
I think you and I specifically, I think we would be really susceptible to joining a cult.
You think?
Because, like... You're like, I haven't heard these guys speak in a month.
I know.
And you were front row just staring.
Literally, bro. I'm sitting there with my camera, just like, man, like
I've been in that room, dude. I know. I get
a
it.
wall, bro.
I totally get it. Like, I feel the same way. And I was sitting there, I was like, you know, if Kenny and staff like started a cult, which like you kind of have to like, in a football team,
I'd join it.
I think we would join.
I don't even think I would. I would absolutely join it.
That passed my mind when you were saying that was we are so susceptible to being
I think
in a
again,
cult.
and maybe, you know, obviously that's a joke, right? But reading a little bit more into it is like there's just something about hearing these guys speak as like leaders of men that is just like it's encouraging to have, right? There are a ton of coaches nationally at a ton of different schools that you can listen to, and they all have their different ways of talking to the media or leading a program. But for Kenny, it is such a genuine thing. I think it is really for me, and I think a lot of the fan base has, you know, wants to do that. Would be like, hey, if Kenny's starting to call, I'm in. Where do I sign up?
No,
right?
And again, I said it as a joke, but like when you hear all the players mention why they came here, it's not like you're hearing one thing and you're seeing something else.
Correct.
Right? Like if you heard from all the players like Kenny is so this, Kenny is so that, and then you go to his press conference and you walk away uninspired, you're like, okay, then what's the connection here? Really, what's going on? But I mean, we knew it from his first press conference. Like I remember his first media tour. Like I was producing a show back then that had him in studio for like 30 minutes. And, you know, I was the guy that led him into the studio. I was the, hi, how are you doing, Mr. Dillingham?
You were the Dilly Wrangler?
Yeah, I was the Dilly Wrangler.
The new nickname just dropped?
Yeah, they're like, hey, Kenny's in the front office. Why don't you go grab him? Because I was producing the show that day and bring him back. And I was dressed terribly.
Really?
I think I had a Suns jersey and sweatpants on. Yeah, and a backwards hat.
Jeez.
So just
look how far you've come, man.
I mean, no, I still dress the same.
Yeah,
basically. I mean, I'm wearing a hoodie and a hat.
Forward hat, though.
Forward hat today. But from that moment, like listening to him speak, like you could just tell it was different, and because it was raw and authentic, and it's exciting to see now that they have some success. You know, I know we've repeated this a lot, but what can they do going forward? I know we'll get to some sound about, you know, how they're going to avoid being one of those stories that 10, 20 years from now, you say, you remember that 1 year of Arizona State.
Yeah. We do have Che in the chat talking about Kanye, Sam, and all that stuff. Got some exciting stuff as it relates to Kanye. To let everybody know, we're going to do that
Kanye
maybe.
Udow.
Yes, a little bit later on.
Let's do the full name.
As spring football inches closer, we will kind of break that news, which will be some fun stuff for everybody here, and then obviously the fan base as well. But we will get to some Kenny sound, some Charlie Ragle sound, and Jake Plummer sound a little bit later on in the show. But I do want to focus in on the main topic today of moving past the Big 12 championship, right? Because this is something that Kenny has mentioned over the last couple of days that, you know, it's great for the fan base. And I think the fan base can certainly continue to, you know, really soak in the fact that they're still Big 12 champions. And, you know, nobody can take that away from Arizona State. But this team, this coaching staff has fully moved on to 2025, right? It's a new group of guys. For the most part, you know, you've obviously got a lot of those returners. It's about recapturing what they did last year. Right?
Yeah,
it's
but
something
not
new.
not recreating in a sense of like you want to win the Big 12 and you want to go to the college football playoffs, but you. That's a funny comment.
Ric Flair, baby.
Ric Flair says, "Who are you guys? Excited to see in the spring. I'm excited to see Hamilton from Alabama."
Yeah,
we are the PHNX Sun Devils podcast. We do 5 shows a week, post game for football and for basketball every single game, plus live shows in between. We cover the Big 12.
Who are you, Ric Flair?
We like to have fun. You don't know about You know about Ric Flair?
I mean, I know about Ric Flair. I just want to know if we got the Ric Flair in the chat right
now. I mean, that Ric Flair spells it differently. But yes, we are PHNX Sun Devils. We're your go-to place for ASU and maybe a little Big 12 content as well.
Absolutely.
But yeah, I mean, moving on and moving past is exactly what you need out of this team, because if you're looking backwards, then you're not preparing for everybody else who's now looking at you with a target on your back.
Yeah.
Arizona State going into the season is a game that everybody has circled on their schedules now. And last year, that was the complete opposite, right? So you need to be on top of your game, adjusting and manipulating your strengths from last year into something that can't be exploited this year now that you have an entire year on film.
Yeah. I mean, and it's something that we discussed with Justin Watley, right? Is there anything that really changes for you going from the hunted or from the hunter to the hunted kind of
Right.
mentality. And I think that's the unique thing with Arizona State, right? Is last year it was, hey, nobody believes in us. No. We are absolutely the hunter in this situation. And you bring up a good point here, right? You're the defending Big 12 champions. Everybody that plays you next season is going to want to beat you. You were a team that was in the college football playoff. You were one of the final 8 teams in college football still playing in January. You absolutely have a target on your back. But that's not necessarily something that this staff and this team is going to be worried about moving into 2025, right? And that's the same thing last season. That might be hard for some fans to really remove yourself because, again, you see a championship and it's like, boom, yeah, we're top dog. But for Arizona State, it was never about the outside noise. It was never about X, Y, and Z. Yes, were there people hating on Arizona State? Absolutely. Were there people that thought this team and this program was trash at one point going into the Big 12 season saying, hey, this is going to be the worst team in the conference?
Yeah.
Yes, that was bulletin board material, right? But as a team, it was always, and you can go back to what Kenny had to say a number of times throughout the season, it was always about us. It was always about, the preparation. It was how can we get better during the bye weeks? It was about how can we get healthy? How can we improve our game? Not, hey, this is what Kansas does. Not, hey, this is what Iowa State does.
Yeah.
And yes, there are certain things that, like, going into certain games, you evaluate and you prepare for. But that's a unique thing I think about this team and this program is that it's so, like, clear, right? Is there's always outside noise, good, bad, in between. This team doesn't give it.
Their identity, them. I was going to cut you off before you said a word you couldn't say. Their identity has nothing to do with anybody else.
No.
It doesn't. Their identity is not rooted in being picked last in the conference. Their identity is not rooted in being Big 12 champions. Their identity is rooted in how they go about handling their business. And they have always handled their business like they're the hunted.
Yeah.
You watch this team practice spring ball last year, fall ball last year. And you're not practicing like a team that really has nothing going on for them. And just to kind of paint a picture of like how fast things can change in the Big 12, obviously the 2023 Big 12 championship was between Texas and Oklahoma, right? But Oklahoma State was the 16th ranked team in the country last year, was 7-2 in conference and 10-4 overall. Mm-hmm. And they returned their entire starting offensive line full of seniors. They're trash, but they returned.
Grandfathers.
Trash, but they returned.
Yeah.
They returned wide receiver weapons. They returned a quarterback, and they returned Ollie Gordon, who was a Heisman candidate and in some people's eyes, a Heisman favorite going into last season, right? What happened there?
Didn't win a conference
Complete
game.
fall off.
Yeah.
Complete 180. BYU in 2023 was 2-7 in conference, 5-7 overall. Baylor 2-7 overall, 3-9. Oh, 3-9 overall, 2-7 in conference. You're talking about teams that have completely flipped positions in 1 year in the same conference.
Good and bad.
Right? Good and bad. So if you're Arizona State, you can't walk in and just be like, and I'm not saying they are, but you can't rest on your laurels, even if you're returning, which ASU is. A lot of great players on defense. You're returning your starting quarterback. You're losing some key players, but you're replacing them with tangible pieces that you're not really betting on, hey, we've never seen this guy before. You're betting on Kanye Udau, who has over 1,000 yards rushing last season.
10 plus touchdowns too.
So the formula is there. The fire should still be lit under their ass because I don't know where they're going to be picked in the preseason poll. My bold prediction is they ain't going to be picked one.
Really?
And I don't think so. I think they're going to give it to a different program. I don't know who.
I've seen a lot of people really falling in love with Kansas State again.
Kansas State, I think Iowa State, they have 2 quarterbacks returning as well. You could talk yourself into them. And I think BYU. I think BYU is going to be one of those teams that
they're returning a lot of people too.
I think they're going to be one of those teams that Big 12 media falls in love with over the next 3 to 4 months.
I mean, let them fall in love with them.
No,
man.
I don't care. That's fine with me. I'm just saying, like, you're not going into this season saying it's Arizona State's to lose. It's no competition.
Yeah.
It is like ASU still has to prove themselves. Other teams are really active, and you never know who that surprise team like Arizona State's going to be going into next year.
Yeah, it's valid.
There's a lot on the table and a lot on the line for this team, for one that proved their dominance last season by killing the Big 12 championship game, winning out the end of the season to get there.
Yeah, it was a slaughter.
But you still go over the next 6 months and say, okay, we still have a chip on our shoulder. We still have something to prove. We don't like how our season ended. there's still another realm to go to.
You know, I think, again, to tie up this conversation before we hit a break and then get to the Kenny sound, I think the chip on the shoulder is no longer, hey, can we do it? Right? Because you've seen it. You've seen that this team can. The sentiment, I think, moving forward now, and I think the sentiment that will be for this program as long as Kenny Dillingham is at the helm is, can we turn this thing into a juggernaut? Yeah. Can Arizona State be a team like Kenny had mentioned in a different interview of like, hey, Oregon took over the early 2000s, right? The Brenneman, they really got in there, right? Or Clemson in the 2010s. Yeah. Can Arizona State be that? Can this not be a flash in the pan? Is this something more than an 11-win miracle season led by a Heisman-level running back in Cam Scatterbu? Can you do that? Can you do it year over year? That is the new sentiment for Kenny Dillingham and this program. It's no longer, hey, you don't believe in us, this is where we're at. Okay, that's fine. Now we're going to prove to everybody that wasn't just a one-year thing. You can come into Mountain America Stadium, and we're going to beat you up and down the field. I'm juiced. We can go to your house. We're going to beat you up and down the field. You want me to run through the wall? You want to play for a title? That's fine. You can come play for a title. Just know you're taking home silver because we're going to beat you up and down the field, right? That's what this is
you're
about.
You're going to make me punch something.
Well, look. We're here right now. We're at a 10. We're going to take it down a notch, do some, lovely ad reads. Yeah, we're going to pay the bills. And then we're going to get to some KD
I'm going
sound.
back to 10.
Sound good?
Back to 10 when we get back.
Let's hit a break.
Listen, I might punch a wall so hard right now that I can't drive home.
Tough.
And if I can't drive home, well, that's okay. Because I know that our friends over at Waymo, hey, here we go.
There it is. What is that, third, fourth day in a row?
5 shows in a row, baby. 5 shows in a row that I've made that sound. But listen, Waymo's not making all that sound, even though I made it, because they are serving up all-electric Jaguar I-Pace vehicles, providing a consistent zero-emission experience for Waymo riders. They are awesome.
They're cool. They're way more fun than everybody else.
That's a bar. They also do 150,000 trips per week across San Francisco, Los Angeles, and hey, Phoenix. Waymo is the first company to serve as a fully autonomous ride with no human behind the wheel in 2015, and they have over 40 million miles of real-world driving experience. That is enough to drive to the moon and back 80 times. Listen,
a lot of times.
It's real simple. All you have to do is download the Waymo One app and ride today.
Look, I know it's still pretty early 2025, so you may be buying a home. You may be selling a home. Well, I'll tell you what, the Carol Royce team is here to help you guys out. Look, selling your home shouldn't feel like a last-second Hail Mary, okay? You need a guaranteed win, and that's exactly what Carol Royce offers, okay? Carol Royce sells faster and for more money than the average agent. Not to mention, Carol has sold over 12,000 homes across the valley, okay? The proof is in the pudding when it comes to the Carol Royce team. And look, again, start a new adventure in 2025, whether that be buying a home, selling a home. Carol Royce is going to take care of you. If you're considering a cash offer, don't settle for one. Get up to 6 of the best offers with at least one at 100% of market value, or Carol will pay the difference. When it's time to sell your home, make the smart play. Call Carol Royce or visit Carol online at carolroyceteam.com. That's carolroyceteam.com. Terms and conditions apply.
Speaking of electric and just getting fired up, Captain Redbeard's just that dude.
I mean, I called him on my way in.
Yeah.
I said, how's my favorite little workhorse doing?
Okay. You said that like 4 times.
It's true.
Today.
It's true.
It's a little disrespectful.
Is it disrespectful?
I think so.
I feel like it's not disrespectful to call.
Definitely a little.
No, absolutely not. Cam Scatterbu, workhorse. Okay, Michael Jordan,
but
workhorse.
Think about how
Kyle
you just
Cooper,
said it.
Workhorse.
Okay, if you say it like that, fine. But you called him your little workhorse.
He is my little workhorse. He's our little workhorse.
No, I'm not claiming
Just
that.
keep the little out of it, because I'm obviously not small.
He's a big workhorse.
He's a big, yeah.
You want me to call you a big workhorse?
Captain.
Maybe just workhorse. Yeah, captain. I'm going to say
our stallion
captain,
of a producer.
That's a good one.
Boom.
Kyle the Stallion.
Kyle the Stallion.
Kyle the Stallion. Kyle the Stallion is notorious for just eating soup out of a can.
Any relation to Meg the Stallion?
I don't know. Maybe. You have to ask Kyle.
Maybe.
But Kyle's notorious for just eating soup out of the can around the office. And just mid-show, he's ripping a coffee, he's cutting clips, and he just checks his soup can, he's out, no more, throws it away, and I'm like, that is just a man.
He's in his own
mission.
element right now.
That is a man on a mission.
We got our GM to try it now.
Yeah,
Dude, cold soup.
Espo said he's going to do it.
Hop
He's going
on
to
the
give it a
bandwagon.
shot.
Like it's crack. Like it's not a big deal.
It's not,
like,
I mean, I'm interested. I mean, everybody in this office, there are a lot of people in this office that give Kyle and Noah crap.
Yeah, because Noah, the Suns producer Noah, also just eats soup cold out of the can.
give him a shot.
Listen, man. Listen. You just gotta do what you gotta do. These are just killers only, man. They're just locked in.
They absolutely
and
are.
Locked in on getting these clips we're about to play.
It's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful stuff. Look, something that we touched on for a little bit and is really the premise of today's show, right? Is getting everybody to buy in again to what Arizona State can be and wants to be in 2025. So how do you do that? How do you, quote unquote, start from scratch if you have to? Well, this is what Kenny had to say about it.
Yeah, I think different guys have to step up. You know, we talked about it. It can't just be X again. You know, that emotion that you felt, Scat left, so naturally we're going to have other people relate, step up. But it can't be one person. It can't be two people. It can't be three people. Last year, we had a really special mix of everybody was just invested. Everybody poured everything they could have into it. We've got to be able to find with this team, which is a different team, how to get that emotional investment. Because at the end of the day, football's about winning close games. That's how good seasons happen, is you win close games. I mean, from now until forever, we're going to play close games, and that's in those details. Those small things help you win those close games, and that's going to dictate being whatever that record is or being 5 wins less.
You know, we've talked about there being a lot of change on this roster, and there has been. You're losing some really key players.
You are.
Guys that might be going to the NFL. You know, one guy,
3
for
guys
sure.
that will play in the NFL.
Yeah, whether they get drafted or not.
Yeah.
And we know Scat's going to get drafted. Leif and Shamari, we don't know, but they'll play. They'll at least be on a roster. At the same time, though, you're returning a lot of the same players. A lot more than I think most teams in college football are going to be returning, especially on defense. And that level of attention to detail becomes so much easier when that trust is already installed. Like at this point last year, trust was having to be earned, installed over spring ball, summer practices, whatever they're doing on their own. And then once you get to fall camp and Camp T, and we saw it happen so fast. What's going to happen when that foundation is already there? When he talks about winning close games, you look at a lot of their wins this season, Totri.
Close games.
A lot of them are close games, and you have to think to yourself, like, there has to be a recipe for it that he at least has an idea for. And having those returners, while it doesn't mean you don't have to focus on it, it's got to make it at least a little easier.
Yeah, it absolutely does. I think a really interesting point that Kenny brought up is that it can't be the same guys, right?
Yeah.
Is as much as you love the fire and emotion that Xavier Alford gave you every pregame or that Scat gave you, like, again, X is headed into his last season of college football, right? And you had Cam Scattaboo, who was just a monster for ASU last year. You've seen some halftime speeches and things that Scat has to say.
Yeah.
But part of what made that season special was you had 2 specific guys, one on offense, one on defense, really take charge. And guys that, again, were here the year before.
Yeah.
So for him to say, hey, you know, it can't just be X again, right, is really, really fun for me because we are just a few weeks away from spring football. And that's when those types of players and those types of leaders really solidify themselves or really start to take shape. So I'm curious if it's going to be maybe a new guy comes in. Right? Maybe it is a Kanye Udo who comes in. And
I think Kanye is a good choice. He's a very well-spoken
I agree,
guy.
but maybe it could be guys here last year, right? Maybe it can be a Ben Coleman who has to take over a little bit more
for sure.
as a leadership role on the offensive line. Maybe it's a guy like a Miles Rouser who was here last season and you know was learning next to a guy like an Xavier Alford. Maybe it's some of those guys that
I feel like Keith might be a good pick
I think
for
Keith's
that.
another really good one. CJ Fight.
Because he's been around and he like a lot of the guys, you know, we talk about whether it's Ghost, right, who's a 1 year, and they obviously understand the culture. Everybody who's on the team last year understands the culture, but it's a little bit different for those few holdovers from the 3-win season. The guy like Keith, where you're like, okay, that like going into now this season, 2 seasons later, coming off of that, maybe that's where he can kind of step more into that role as he matures and just by getting older and everything like that.
Yeah.
That might be somebody to look at that steps up into a more vocal role, at least within his unit. this year.
Che saying Sam Levitt is going to be the emotional leader.
Sure.
That's what you always hope for, right? You always want your quarterback to be that guy, and there are obviously programs or NFL teams that don't have quarterbacks that are necessarily the most vocal leader. I think Sam fits the mold of a guy that can certainly be that alpha top dog that is going to get the most out of his guys. And I think we've seen so much change in the way that he approaches, what it means to be a leader, obviously from him first getting on campus as a transfer to Michigan State and the way that he was communicating with the guys to, going back to the Peach Bowl and seeing that level of growth. So I think Sam Levitt's a good one. CJ Fight is another one.
Yeah,
there are
CJ
so
Fight.
many players that were on this team last year and even guys that were on the team the year before that, again, still went through that 3-9 season. I think that's something that is really, really important is you don't necessarily, not that they can't lead, saying that, new guys that haven't been in this spot, that haven't been in this program can't lead. But right. I think there is something to be said about players that were a part of both seasons, that were a part of a 3-9 year, and that were a part of the magic that was the 2024 season for Arizona State. I think having that balance and understanding, hey, for a guy like a CJ Fight or a Keith Abney who didn't play necessarily the most prominent roles in their respective units, their freshman seasons, right?
Or if it's, it's a Jordan Tyson or an Xavier Alford who were a part of the program, but didn't get to play, but just kind of had to sit to the side and watch all that happen. And then they get thrust in the situation. Maybe somebody this past season hasn't been able to play, whether it's just through depth or through injury, and they watched all of last season play out.
Like a relief.
And now they earn their spot in a crowded room.
Yeah. And
they are a vocal leader. I mean, Ralik is a very funny guy. Very outward personality type of guy. So I could see him being there as well. You have a lot of veterans on this team. I mean, Elijah O'Neal coming back, he was on there on that 3-9 team. He's somebody that grew a ton last year as well. I think at the end of the day, the only thing you don't want is for you to only be able to pick out 3 or 4 or 5 players, right? I think we've listed half the damn roster already, and it all makes sense.
Yeah. And that's the fun part about it, right?
Definitely.
Yeah, a team I don't think can ever be short on having those types of guys and having those types of leaders that Arizona State had in 2024 in X and SCAT was obviously pivotal in the Sun Devils' success in 2024. But like we said off the top, right, this is the mantra heading into 2025 is we are going to be so much more than just a flash in the pan. We're going to be more than just a one-hit wonder, like you said in the cold open, right? You want to take over the era. You want to be what Oregon was in the 2010s. You want to be what Clemson was in that era as well, really coming out of nowhere and being a blue blood powerhouse program in college football. And Kenny was asked about it today, just his thoughts on taking over, a decade or an era and really establishing yourself as a powerhouse program.
I'm big on trends, whether it's coaching trends, whether it's football trends. I think if you're copying a trend constantly, I think you're in trouble. So, from a football perspective, while some teams are watching the Detroit Lions right now, right? I don't want to watch the Detroit Lions because everybody's watching the Detroit Lions. Even though they're really good and they're doing creative things, well, then we're just going to be part of the new trend. That doesn't make you different. So I study trends, and that was a trend where, you can't really be different from it, but it's just every year, every 10 years, every 8 years, a new team kind of arises, and it's all for different purposes, different regions. Dabo got to Clemson and absolutely, did a phenomenal job, and Phil Knight and the investment they made into Oregon kind of changed and all that. You could even add Boise into that mix a little bit if you really wanted to in that era where they kind of put themselves on the map, and I think it goes back to the blue turf. It was so different. Oh my gosh, where is that? Then all of a sudden they started winning. Then they win the Oklahoma game. It's okay, that's Boise State. They're a really good football team. So I think everybody has these moments where they kind of put themselves on the map in these eras. And right now there's, you could argue Utah's inching into that world, but nobody's really stamped themselves as this era. And I think that's the challenge is can we do that? Can we be that team that in 7-8 years from now, they're like, whoa, they showed up in this time. And then 10 kids that are in, the 3rd grade, that's all they remember. And that's the goal.
Imagine a world where 10 years from now, you think back and you're talking to somebody like, wait, Arizona State wasn't good at football at a certain point?
That'd be fun, huh?
Yeah.
I could say you survived that era.
Sure. I mean, it's so weird because it could really happen with so many different schools, and it's hard to imagine it because you just don't think about it in sports. Like, you don't think about a time like right now, like, hey, Alabama was not always good at basketball.
Yeah,
right?
that's facts.
Like, Alabama's one of the best teams in the country right now. That's not
For the last couple seasons.
And that's not always been the case,
Yeah.
right? And what happened? They had a head coach who came in and just basically revolutionized their sport local. Like, Nate Oates has completely changed that program.
Yes.
Right. And so now you walk into a season and you expect Alabama to be atop the SEC, and you expect them to lead their way into a deep run through March. And I know it's like a cross sport comparison, but if ASU is able to capitalize on that and string this, not only because we're only going to be focused on next season right now, but big picture, right? We talked about Kenny's contract extension. He ain't going nowhere.
No.
So what do you do in 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years from now? Think about Oregon football in 2017, 2016, 2015, right? Like, we're in 2025 now, and look at where Oregon is, and look at how people treat Oregon.
Yeah.
Right?
Oregon's a powerhouse.
That's what I'm saying is, like, you know, there is a path there for a school like Arizona State to get there. And I think that as focused as Kenny's going to be on day by day, game by game, you also have to imagine that he's trying to think sustainably as well. And how can I keep this going? And I have full faith. Like, I'm part of the cult, man. Like, I have full faith.
It's funny, too, when you look at these programs that were brought up, right, in Oregon or at Clemson, right? Because Dabo is really the guy that put Clemson in this era of college football. But for Oregon, something that's been sustainable, but it's lasted beyond coaches and players. I think that's something that's really, really important, right? Is Oregon survived after Marcus Mariota. They survived after DeAnthony Thomas. They survived after Chip Kelly. And they have been able to keep up that brand and keep up the culture. This is a team that, yes, they didn't go as far as people thought this past season in the college football playoff. Guess what? They went into the Big Ten in year one and won, right?
Yeah.
It's what they do at this point because that's the program. Like, it's not just the fan base. It's not just the coaching staff. It's everything all in one. It's transfer portal. It's recruiting. Heck, I'm pretty sure Oregon landed the number 1 wide receiver and corner in the recruiting class this past season. You know how difficult that is to do at any school?
Yeah.
And especially for a team like Oregon that hasn't won national championship after national championship after national championship. Yeah. So for Kenny, it's going to be a unique process because you expect Kenny Dillingham to be in the Valley longer than maybe Dabo's been at Clemson, or that,
Which
you know,
has been a long
or
time.
that Chip Kelly or some of those other coaches were at Oregon. The flip side to that is you're not going to have this staff forever.
Well, but you are going to have them at least for a couple of years, and there is
you hope. I don't know. I don't know about
contracts. There is something.
Yeah, but you buy out a contract.
It's true. Well, there is something that I want to say about that, and we could do it after we take another break. Our friends, and I mean that dearly, friends over at Pure Edibles, well, guess what? They're perfect if you're just trying to chill. I said this on yesterday's show. Everybody always comes up and asks me, Eric, how are you so calm? How are you so...
Is that what they come up? They come up to you and say that?
Kyle's face right now is awesome. And I tell them, I got a little secret for you. It's our friends over at Pure Edibles. And the best part about Pure Edibles is you know exactly what you're getting into when you take one. And that can sometimes be the scariest part about taking edibles is you don't know what you're getting into. How am I going to feel? How much should I take? What is it going to taste like? Am I going to want to throw up from the flavor? You don't have to worry about any of that with Pure Edibles. They're a full-fledged candy company. I recommend the Starburst, aka like their Kicks is what they call it.
Candy, bro.
And then their watermelon gummies taste just like watermelon Jolly Ranchers, but they also have labeled on each tin, relax, uplift, sleep, whatever effect you're wanting from your edible. Well, they have it clearly listed there. Go find yourself some Pure Edibles products from one of the over 130 dispensaries in Arizona.
I love it. I also love our friends over at Sanderson Ford. And take note, guys, because in celebration of Arizona being the 48th state of the union and Ford trucks being number 1 in sales for 48 straight years, Sanderson Ford is celebrating President's Day with a presidential sale on 848 new vehicles, many with savings of $4,800 or more. Save up to $4,800 on Bronco Sport Badlands. Save $10,000 off on an F-150 STX and XLT trucks and save 10 grand off an full-size Bronco Badlands. I might need to head into Sanderson Ford, honestly. Sanderson Ford also has 25 quality pre-owned vehicles to choose from, priced at 25 grand or less. Guys, offers on 2024 models and include Ford rebates, Sanderson Ford discounts, and Conquest Cash and Flex Buy discounts you must qualify for. See dealer for details. All offers expire March 3rd, 2025. Hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, drop a 5-star review wherever you get your podcast. Chan in the chat saying, Kenny's vision and passion is the smelling salts we need to mobilize the sleeping giant.
So, to get to that level that Kenny's talking about, right? To become your Clemsons, your Oregons, your Bamas of the world, because Bama wasn't always like this.
Not for all of eternity, no.
Not for all of eternity, even though it feels like it.
It does feel like, well, our whole lifetime.
Our whole lifetime, right? He's already done one of the hardest parts, which is get over that first hump.
Yeah.
Have a season that takes you from, hey, maybe your ceiling as a program is to be competing at the top of your conference, but not, going to the college football playoffs, right? That's a good ceiling to have.
Yeah.
Good teams. Iowa State, Kansas State, right? Like, good teams.
Utah, year over year.
Utah, BYU, right? And maybe every once in a while you sneak in, right? Like, there's a ceiling to that. And there's a chance that if ASU can't capitalize, they end up falling somewhere in there. But right now they got over that first. They got over that first hump. I'm not saying that's what I'm predicting, dude. They got over that first hump. Now, the most difficult part in being able to sustain are going to be these next couple of years afterwards. And maybe you can't hold on to a Marcus Arroyo and a Brian Ward for more than 2-3 years. But if you could take that success and continue to build on it over this year, next year, and maybe a year after that, then you're hitting 3 seasons, 4 seasons. You're talking about a kid's entire time that they're playing high school football. You've been that guy.
Yeah.
You've been that team. Once you get that point, not that it's self-sustaining, it can fall off, but like you mentioned with Oregon is a machine. Dan Lanning's a machine, but Oregon was a machine before Dan Lanning, right? Oregon was a machine with and without Marcus Mariota, right? Like, these things can come and go, but the institution remains the same. And in order to get there, that's where year 2, 3, and 4 come into play. As much as we love year 1, you can't build that type of stuff off solely year 1.
Yeah, you can't. And look, part of, I think, with the idea for Arizona State to become that powerhouse and, transfer portal, recruiting, NIL, there's so much that goes into it now in this era of college sports. People fall in love with the games. They fall in love with the coaches, and they most of all fall in love with the players, right? They fall in love with a guy like Cam Scatterbu, like kids that were growing up last season, right? Over the next however many years, Cam Scatterbu is going to be imprinted in their brain for as long as they're football fans.
Yeah.
Right? Because of what he did, because of what he meant to the community. And, he is going to be an NFL player. He's going to the combine. He's going to be drafted, etc. I do want to bring up, obviously, the unfortunate fact that Shamari and Leif didn't get invited to the NFL combine.
They don't know ball.
It's something that Kenny spoke about a little bit today, and I think he had an interesting perspective on the whole thing, saying that not necessarily is this going to be a chip on the shoulder for the team this year. It doesn't have a ton of effect on him. But he did give an interesting answer as to what the future might hold for ASU players heading to the league.
But I do know it's unfortunate that guys like Leif specifically, Shamari specifically, who were kind of 2 of the borderline guys, aren't getting invited, didn't get invited. I think both those guys are NFL caliber players, or players that have a really, really good chance to make teams and excel. So that was unfortunate just because they were a part of obviously a winning football team. But, I tell our guys, it doesn't happen overnight. Like, there's a reason some teams get more people consistently in it. It's because they've won for longer. If we go and have a good year again, you will never have that happen again where somebody gets snubbed from Arizona State, in my opinion, again. It's the fact that we came from so low. I think if we continue to build and build and build, we're going to get some people in there that maybe, are borderline to not get in.
It's not surprising that he's like, you know what, you're just going to have to earn it. You're going to have to. And you know what? Those 2 type of guys, Leif, Shamari, I think they'll be the first to tell you that that's going to light a fire under them the same
yeah.
way that it lit in front of underneath them going into this season.
Yeah.
Right. And how many times in the NFL do you see somebody who comes out of nowhere and just
happens all the time,
every
year.
time,
every
undrafted
year.
free agent, somebody drafted late who bounces around a couple of teams but finds the right home. Look at Zach Bond.
Yeah.
Over in Philadelphia. Right. Who the hell was talking about him before this season? Let alone when he was coming out of college.
It's a good point. It's a good point.
Like,
Not only
you can find your way into the league.
Yeah, you absolutely can. And for, the program, I think Kenny brings up a point that I've brought up a number of times, is that if you want your guys to get drafted, if you want to see Sun Devils playing on Sundays, what does that take? Well, it takes far more than just being a really, really good football player. Part of it falls on the program as well. And Arizona State did their part this season, right? Making the college football playoff, winning a Big 12 title game. There is so much that goes into national eyes and scouts and general managers, and obviously being able to have those big-time games against other big-time players and big-time moments is something that affects a player's draft stock, right? If you go for 300 yards as a running back and 2 touchdowns in a week 1 opener against NAU, do people notice it? Sure. Do people notice it a little more when you do it in the college football playoff against the number 1 run defense in the country in Texas? Yes, absolutely, right? So being able to have those moments, have those opportunities, compete for the championships year over year, right? Mm-hmm. Alabama, Ohio State, Georgia, Clemson, Oregon. What do all those schools have in common? Aside from the fact that their players are constantly getting drafted in the first, second, and third rounds of the NFL draft, well, they're constantly at the top of their conference.
They're playing important games.
And they're playing in important games, not just important games, but important games late in the season, right? And for Arizona State, that hasn't necessarily always been, the circumstances for the Sun Devils. You look at, the Herm Edwards era, you could point to a few games where it's like, okay, this is your big time moment.
Those were like earlier in the season.
They were. There was the Oregon game that was a little bit later. But
in conference play, but not like building up to something. Right?
No.
It just was it was a moment. It wasn't a build up.
Nobody's talking about Arizona State in December.
No.
Right? At least not in previous times. But now you've got a program that you hope to constantly be playing in that college football playoff, constantly be playing for a Big 12 championship, a Big 12 title down the stretch. And that is going to have a lasting impact on Arizona State Sun Devils moving on to that next level, right? Sure. Think of it like a farm system, but not necessarily for teams and players, but for fan bases, right? Again, the same thing I said about Scat. They're going to be players, or they're going to be fans of Cam Skattebo. If he's a San Francisco 49er, an Arizona Cardinal, a Pittsburgh Steeler, doesn't matter. They're just fans of Cam Skattebo. And every single one of them is going to tell you, hey, he went to Arizona State. Yeah. That's going to be something that lasts, right? Sure. Jaden Daniels, it sucks that you have to have this conversation about, boom, this guy had an amazing college career, a great rookie season in the NFL. Where'd he go to school? Everybody says LSU.
Sure.
Right? You don't want that. You don't want that anymore. You get a guy like Sam Levitt in a couple years, who people have already projected to be one of the top quarterbacks available in 2026. The same goes for Jordan Tyson in the wide receiver room. These are guys that when they get to their next stop, it's not a when, it's an if. They're always going to be Arizona State Sun Devils, and people don't talk about the lasting impact that has on some of those players, right? Cooper DeJean, where did he go to school? Do you know? Boom, right?
You thought you had me there, huh?
No, I didn't. I would hope so that you knew where he went, right? But that's because it's such a thing now.
Yeah, and you're looking at the season too. And the final 4 games for ASU is Iowa State, West Virginia, Colorado, Arizona. If they win that Iowa State game, they could be in a position to run roughshod through the end of the season through the Big 12 and establish like a very good Big 12 championship. So it gives them a chance to where if they can capture attention at the beginning of the season, you're going to beat NAU, hopefully. Fingers crossed. You beat Mississippi State, Texas State, and then you start Big 12 playoff and you kick Baylor's ass.
Yeah.
Conversations are going to be had. Middle of the season, you got some good teams like TCU, Utah, Texas Tech, Houston. Then you hit Iowa State. If you win that Iowa State game for the last 3 games of the season, the conversation is going to be, is Arizona State going to be in the Big 12 championship?
Are you back to back?
And this year, it's going to be taken more seriously. Because I remember where we were 4 games out from the end of the season, right? You and I were talking.
What a weird place.
You and I were talking like, hey,
Where were
Not to be crazy.
I want to go
but
back. I want to take a
there's
look.
a path here, right? But it was like let's not get ahead of ourselves, right? If you're going to the final 4 games of the season, the Big 12, every single Arizona State game, if they take care of business at the beginning of it, is going to be must watch because that's going to be championship stuff on the line.
So November 9th, they beat UCF without Cam Scadaboo. They won 35-31. It was a back and forth game.
And you're not thinking Big 12 championship.
No, because at that point, you're still a 2-loss team.
You're unranked.
And given what everybody else is doing in the Big 12, you saw what you had the rest of the way. You saw you had a ranked Kansas State on the road. And then after that, BYU was coming to town. At that time, I think BYU was number 6 in the country.
Yeah.
Right? So we were sitting there like, hey, okay, this team hasn't lost in, couple games. They beat the brakes off Oklahoma State. They won a tight one against UCF without their star. But this is where you're going to learn a lot about this team, right? And then we did the watch along for Kansas State. And they won that game, and it was like... okay, that was they didn't just win. They came out in the first half and they beat the brakes.
They
off
dominated
Kansas
so much
State.
that the second half Kansas State played better. It didn't even matter.
And then you're like, okay, like, are they gonna really
BYU
do this
at
thing?
home,
Are they gonna really do this
homecoming.
thing? And then they go out and they beat BYU. And then you're like,
Arizona with the Big 12 championship.
and then
on
things
the
fall
line.
their way too, right? Colorado had to drop a game, which they did. Thank you, Kansas Jayhawks for that one. And then you're like, all you have to do is beat your rival. Right? All you have to do is go to Tucson and beat the bad Wildcats. And they did that. They destroyed the Wildcats.
And and I don't know if Arizona's going to be good this year. Not hopefully, but hopefully from their perspective, they're going to be better considering that they're putting all their chips on Brent Brennan, which thank you. From their perspective, they expect to be better, though. Colorado's probably going to be a little bit worse. I don't think West Virginia is going to be that good.
No.
You have a chance to dominate the final 3 weeks of the season and really make a statement.
You do.
Right? So I think that's really exciting, and that's a way to get eyes on you in a way that's a little different for NFL scouts than it was before.
80 asking an interesting question. Do you think ASU wins the Big 12 if Oklahoma and Texas were still in the Big 12? I want to answer that question, get to some more sound from Charlie Ragle and Jake Plummer after we take our final break.
You remember what I said at the start of the show?
One-hit wonders.
Well, a little after that.
No.
We would totally join the cult.
Oh, we
Kenny
would join.
Dillingham.
Yeah.
But I'm already part of a cult.
Man, you set me up. There you go. Sorry,
There you
man.
go. Colt Cannabis. I really did. That was I lobbed it off the backboard to you. You grabbed it and you threw it at the other end.
I did.
Yeah, you said, what's a basketball? I'm playing football. But listen, you want to know who knows who they are? It's our friends Colt Cannabis that's now available at your local True Leaf locations with a huge variety of premium flower, including a True Leaf exclusive magic marker. The Valley, a.k.a. Anthony Totre's been asking for her, and now she's back. You can visit trueleaf.com to find a local shop and place an order. Tell them that PHNX sent you. Listen, great flowers hard to find these days. Luckily, our friends at Colt Cannabis have been dropping absolute heat in the PHNX studios and at your local True Leaf, and you're not going to have to cut off an arm and a leg to pay for it. Listen, head over to trueleaf.com to find your local shop or place an order online and tell them that Captain Redbeard and his cold soup sent you.
And his cold soup sent you, huh? Is that the same thing you're saying when you go sign up for Desert Financial Credit Union?
You know what I'm saying when I sign up for Desert Financial
Tell
Credit
me.
Union? Cha-ching! Because I just got $200 for free.
Guys, Desert Financial, they are the official retail banking partner of Arizona State University, and they've been doing it for more than 84 years. Two things. Desert Financial has been Arizona's largest and most trusted local credit union. Of course, they're dedicated to creating exceptional experiences by giving back to the community and providing financial solutions that make lives better. Look, I talk about it all the time. We are still very, very early into 2025, and there is no better time than the new year to make sure you set yourself up financially. So that could mean a ton of different things, right? Checking, savings accounts, mortgages, loans, maybe new credit cards or some investment options. Don't worry, don't fret. Desert Financial, they've got you covered on all of those different options. And now is the time to show your ASU team spirit. Open a free checking account online and get those $200 that Eric was talking about, plus your choice of 3 Arizona State University Visa debit cards. Go to desertfinancial.com/ASU to get started. Let's go ahead. Let's get into that question that AD asked. Does Arizona State still win the Big 12 if Oklahoma and Texas are in the conference? Oklahoma was pretty bad last year.
Listen, it would be harder.
Yeah,
it would certainly be harder.
I still think this team would be...
I didn't have a chance.
This team would still be in that championship game.
Yeah, I think so too. I think it would be it would be closer. But
Yes, it would be
Texas
closer.
beat them, even though On 3 picked it as the worst officiating call of the.
It was,
year.
but
Texas still won. So you'd have to say that Texas would have won the Big 12 last year, and Arizona State would have came in second because the two teams faced off in the.
But it's not just about winning the conference, right? It's about even though Iowa State got ran through in that game, they still had one of their best seasons, if not the best season in program history, and that impacted their ability to get recruits, to get transfers, to get NIL funding. Being in that game, being in that conversation at the end of the season, whether you're in the championship or not, means a whole hell of a lot more than people actually think. So regardless if Arizona State would have beaten Texas in the Big 12 title game or played them, or if Oklahoma was still here, this is a team in Arizona State in a program that you would expect to be in the top 4 of this conference every year, as long as Kenny Dillingham is here. And I wouldn't expect that to change if the Longhorns and the Sooners were here, to be completely frank with you. So it is what it is at that point. We are going to move on to some Charlie Ragle and Jake Plummer sound.
Appreciate you being here.
Absolutely. And if you want to listen to the entirety of what Kenny Dillingham, Charlie Ragle, and Jake Plummer had to say, don't worry. It's all going to be up on the PHNX Sports YouTube channel today and tomorrow. So make sure you are subscribed. Turn on the little notifications anytime we go live or anybody here at PHNX goes live. A lot of great content.
If you didn't know, I host our son's show as
he
well.
Does do. Wait, you do that?
Sometimes.
Congrats, man. That's big for you.
All the time.
What do you do around here, Captain Redbeard?
Nothing.
Yeah, nothing.
Nothing. You just chill.
Just goes to the gym.
Just goes to the gym.
Cold soup, goes to the gym.
And steers the ship. That's
fair.
it.
That is
the
absolutely
most important job.
I love it. I love it. Look, Charlie Ragle, obviously the special teams coach at Arizona State. He's got a new weapon in Jesus this season, so I know there are a lot of fans excited to see that. But Charlie is a guy that I was sitting listening to today, and again, I bring up Kenny, and it fires me up. Charlie had some banger quotes today. I'm just going to put that out there, which, again, you could listen to the entirety of what Charlie Ragle had to say on our YouTube channel. But he was asked at one point about Arizona State being a flash in a pan, right? At other stops, has there ever been conversation of, hey, why can't Arizona State do this long term? What's the struggle? Why can't they win? And the answer was kind of well, there hasn't really been one beaming light, or a beacon is the word that he used.
That guy.
Exactly. But it sounds like Arizona State has that guy. Charlie Ragle said that Kenny Dillingham is the beacon for the Devils.
We've never really had one central figure or central theme to dial everything into a point of why ASU is and can be special. And honestly, and I'm not just saying this because I work for the guy, but he is that beacon. I mean, he's a kid that grew up here. He's a kid that believes in Arizona State. He believes in the Valley of the Sun. He totally encompasses everything that is the Valley. And so when you have that as your leader and that beacon, how can you not look to that focal point and say, hey, if we do X, Y, and Z, we have a place to go. And when we get there, we're going to be able to do this, not just for one time, but for a long time.
You could tell he really believed what he was saying. If you're listening on audio, you could tell through his vocals.
Yeah.
But if you saw him, just the most intense look I've ever seen.
Yeah. And this is a guy that, again, that helps give Kenny a start, right? Over at Shap. This is somebody that has been working with and alongside Kenny Dillingham for a number of years. And obviously they had their own paths. Obviously, you know, Kenny did the GA route and then going to Memphis and Auburn and Florida State. And Ragle had his route that at one point he was in the Bay. There's a reason that Charlie Ragle wanted to come work for Kenny Dillingham at Arizona State. And after having the 2 seasons that they've had, complete polar opposites. But again, the first year you knew you were going to take it on the chin. And getting the success that you had last year, to call Kenny Dillingham the beacon for Arizona State, right? To be the guy.
Is that the name?
The beacon?
The beacon. Kenny the Beacon Dillingham.
I mean, that's what he can be. He can be Ken. Well, regardless, right? I think...
No.
I don't know if I would use the beacon. I would use he's the answer. And the reason I say
so he's
that
just Allen Iverson.
is, well, for a different reason, is people are going to ask this offseason, how do you replace Cam Scatterbu? People are going to ask 2 years from now, how do you replace Sam Levitt and Jordan Tyson? People one day are going to come knocking and they're going to ask, how do you replace Marcus Arroyo and Brian Ward? And the answer to every one of those questions from the fan base should be
the beacon.
Kenny Dillingham. That's how, right?
Yeah.
Because when it doesn't go right, you can trust that this guy will figure it out, right? He's creative enough. He's proven time and again that he can do it. Cam Scadaboo wasn't a 5-star blue chip recruit that people were saying at the start of the year was going to win the Heisman. Look what his season entailed. People weren't saying that Sam Levitt was going to tear up the yard when he got to Arizona State, but he did. People were questioning if Jordan Tyson could come back from a gruesome knee injury that saw him pretty much explode his entire knee. He's the 3rd best wide receiver heading into this season, right? This team wasn't very good offensively when they were 3-9 because there were some offensive coordinator issues. What can he do? Not only did he take over play calling at one point, and then the following offseason said, okay, you know what? We're bringing in a guy
who just won the Broyles Award.
Marcus Arroyo. We're bringing him in.
Best assistant coach.
Or when Brian Ward was having a very, very successful defensive season when ASU was 3-9 and there were rumors that USC was going to come calling. What did ASU do? They locked him up. They said, you know what, we see your value. We want you in a Sun Devil polo as long as you possibly can be. Every time, and still only in year 3, every time there has been a question, Kenny Dillingham has been the answer.
Yeah.
And that means a lot, right?
Clip it.
There you go.
That's the clip right there.
Just end of show right
Just
there.
clip it.
Love it. Absolutely love it. Look, I also love to hear from these coaches in regards to what they have to say about the funny stories and the memories of Kenny Dillingham and Charlie Ragle, man. He had his story, and this one goes all the way back to when Kenny was like 19 years old over at Shap. So this is just a great Kenny story from Charlie Ragle.
So I'm driving down the road on Hayden. I can see exactly where I'm at right now. I'm going south or north on Hayden. I'm working my way back to Chaparral. And I called him. And I can't remember exactly what I had called him for. But I got his voicemail. And it's Kenny. And he's 18, 19 years old, Kenny Dillingham. And I get the voicemail and it says, hello. You've reached Kenneth or Ken. It was Ken. Ken Dillingham. Leave your name. And I'm like, what is this guy doing? You know, like he wanted to be grown up so quick. You know, he was making, you know, everybody else was playing checkers. He was playing chess, you know, and it's something so little as that, but he was always ahead of the curve and trying to push the process. I left him the longest voicemail, just ripping him. I was like, your name is Kenny. It's not Ken. You're 19, dude. Act like you got a life and you go out and do something, you know, but he was just different, man. And, I think to this day, that's what the biggest compliment that I can give him is that when everybody else was doing kid things, he was driven to stay the course and stay focused on the goals that he wanted to achieve, which he's living right now.
I mean, are there any other words to describe Kenny Dillingham other than special?
Yeah.
That actually like fit it?
I think there are.
There are other words,
I know,
but
I'm
like
messing with you.
That
might be the best one.
Again, I mean, and you can relate from an NBA perspective, right? Like you have seen a bunch of different NBA coaches. You've heard them speak. You've been out there, right? In
my time in the league.
Your time in the league, obviously, as a star point guard.
Until the injury.
Yeah, of course. We don't talk about that,
Damn
though.
knees.
But like, again, I have covered a lot of coaches. Todd Graham, Brian Kelly, Marcus Freeman, Herm Edwards. Like,
don't forget that one.
There's no coach that I've met and interacted with that functions the way that Kenny Dillingham does. It's like literally he wakes up and goes to sleep with nothing but Arizona State and his family on his mind.
That's it.
It's the craziest thing. It's beautiful. It's beautiful to have that guy at the helm.
I think you just entered
of your
the cult.
program. I told you. I mean, from the start of the show to the end of the show.
If you want to continue with our cult, the cult always continues over at gophnx.com. Thanks for watching on TV, folks.
It absolutely does. Look, we're going to get out of here. We do only have time enough for one Jake Plummer bite. Like I said, if you want to get to the rest of the Jake Plummer interview and everything that Ragle and Kenny had to say, it will be up on our YouTube channel. But this one specifically it's just Jake Plummer. It's great stuff. And everybody wants to talk about Kenny and the players and the fan base. Jake Plummer has something else that he thinks sets Arizona State apart from the rest of the country.
No one talks about it, but I do, and I'm going to continue to, and hopefully we can start a little fire. You're going to play on grass. You're going to play on the best surface that there is in the entire United States. Find me a better playing field than this field here at ASU, and I'll come over there and shake your hand, because that is, you get to play on natural grass on it with great weather and a fan base that, yeah, you got to win to get them to come out. But when you win, they come out, and that's time to go and have some fun. So let's not forget, you can go play on that hard turf surface and that fake grass and all that in these other big schools. But you want to play on real grass, get grass stains on your jersey, and feel what it's like when you were a kid playing football out at the park. That's ASU. You get to play on the real deal. And so, yeah, it's exciting.
Jake Plummer, big grass guy.
The guy.
Guys, that is going to do it for today's episode of the PHNX Sun Devil Show. Hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, drop a 5-star review wherever you get your podcast. An hour flew by.
We were just chopping it up.
It's beautiful stuff. It is beautiful stuff. Like I said, a ton of content continues over at PHNX Sports on the YouTube channel, our website as well. Go PHNX.com. If you enjoyed the content, give us a follow at PHNX_Sun Devils. You can follow me at Anthony_Totri. You can follow this guy, the salad snacker himself, the Dilly Wrangler, if you will, at Eric Ruby.
The Beacon Believer.
That is Eric Ruby, Eric with a K. You can follow the captain of this beautiful vessel, which is now, I feel like, turned into a spaceship, maybe spaceship captain.
Oh, is that our
into
the theme for next season?
Yeah, we did Pirates
just
last year.
Cold Soup in Space.
Oh, wow.
That is a great band name.
Can you man an aircraft, Captain Redbeard?
We're going to the moon, boys.
He can learn.
We're going to the moon. Guys, that is going to do it for today's show. We will see you on Sunday for an ASU basketball post-game show. In the meantime, go Devils. And peace.
We all sit